WWE Elimination Room, Drew McIntyre vs Madcap Moss. A race anywhere is a waterfall. Falls count anywhere match. Drew McIntyre vs Madcap Moss. We go back to the ring in Rome, goes over the rules for this match. Out first comes Madcap Moss, with Happy Baron Corbin. Drew McIntyre is out next with his sword, Angela. He raises it on the stage as the pyro goes off. Drew enters the ring and taunts the heels with his sword. The bell rings, but Drew gets double teamed by Moss and Corbin as fans boo. Moss pounds on Drew now as Corbin looks on from ringside. Drew with a big clothesline for a pop. Drew then knocks Moss out of the ring and follows, working him over and sending him into the barrier. Drew levels Moss with a big chop on the ramp. Corbin runs from behind and decks Drew. Drew chases Corbin up the ramp now. Corbin runs away to the back. Drew runs around to Moss charging him, but Drew drops him with a big boot. Drew sends Moss into the set. Drew goes to powerbomb Moss off the stage, but Corbin makes the save. They hit a double suplex on the ramp and Moss covers, but Drew kicks out at 2. Moss beats Drew down the ramp as Corbin follows. Drew takes a big fall-away slam on the ramp, but still kicks out. Fans boo Moss and Corbin as Moss beats Drew back to the ringside area. Moss sends Drew into the steel ring steps and brings him back in. Drew finally gets a break, leveling Moss with a big throw. Drew with another big throw across the ring, then a kip up. Drew with an Alabama slam in the middle of the ring, dropping Moss on the top of his head. The referee checks on Moss. Corbin distracts Drew, forcing him to chase him around the ring. Moss tries to interfere, but Drew lands a big belly-to-belly throw on the floor. Drew launches Moss over the announce table with a belly-to-belly throw. We get a replay of the stiff Alabama slam that spiked Moss onto his head. Drew stalks Moss at ringside now. Drew readies for a Claymore kick, but Corbin nails him from behind with a steel chair. Moss and Corbin then run Drew through the barrier. Moss covers for a close 2 count on the floor. Corbin is frustrated. Drew slowly crawls back in the ring as Corbin encourages Moss. Moss climbs to the top turnbuckle, but Drew rocks him. Drew with a big chop while Moss is up top now. Drew climbs up for a superplex, and he hits it for a big pop. Drew also lands bad, but is able to drape his arm over Moss for a 2 count. Fans chant, "This is awesome," in now. Moss and Drew go at it now. Moss backslides Drew for a 2 count. Drew comes right back with a future shock DDT. Drew goes for his sword, but Corbin runs in. Drew almost catches Corbin with the sword as Corbin retreats back out of the ring. Drew holds Angela in the air while delivering a Claymore to Moss. Drew points the sword out at Corbin while pinning Moss with a boot on the chest for the win. Winner, Drew McIntyre. This is from our live WWE Elimination Chamber results and viewing party. You can click here to access our full results and discussion. Have a news tip or correction? Send it to Follow Wrestling Incorporated on TikTok. Previous WWE Elimination Chamber, Ronda Rousey and Naomi vs. Charlotte Flair and Sonya Deville. Next WANC podcast, WWE Elimination Chamber review. Updated WrestleMania card.